Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Be Freaking Awesome podcast. I am one of your hosts, Sammy Kinnison, here with Angela Belford. And today we are joined with a very extra special guest, Ashlyn Simmons. Ashlyn, why don't you introduce yourself to us? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do. Yeah, all that stuff.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I'm Ashlyn Simmons. I'm originally from Little Rock, Arkansas. I went to college, both undergrad and graduate school at the University of Arkansas. I got both degrees, a bachelor and a master's of social work. I've lived in Arkansas, Kansas City, and now I live in Austin, Texas. So I am a licensed clinical social worker, LCSW. I work at this wonderful little group practice called Therapy Austin down in Austin, Texas. And we see individual, adults, and family. So we see individuals, couples, and families for therapy services, just outpatient services. So I have been working there for about 4 years. I specialize in complex trauma, PTSD, attachment, and yeah, just a lot of anxiety. So
You also have been helping train other therapists lately, right?
yes, yeah. So I'm on our leadership team. I'm our staff coordinator in charge of new hire training. So throughout the agency, I've been, a counselor, a senior counselor, and then a mentor, and now I am the new hire trainer. So I teach every new hire training cohort that comes in a month, understand the TA way, all of our policies, procedures, and also kind of be that friendly, welcoming face for them as they oftentimes are brand new therapists to the field and are just trying to figure out how to sit in the room with somebody else for a 50-minute session. And that can be a really scary thing. And so just kind of being that, hopefully, I'd like to think a calm, welcoming presence to help them understand that like they're here to learn, to grow, to try new things, and it's okay to do that. It's not a scary thing to step out of your comfort zone. So
On top of all of that and all of the freaking amazing things that you do, you're also one of my best friends. And Ashlyn and I were at each other's weddings at college at the University of Arkansas. That's where we met. And I don't like to think about how long it's actually been because then I start to feel old. But it's been a long time now that we've really been close and been really good friends. And I'm so stinking excited to have you here on the podcast to talk with us today.
yes,
Might I say a decade-long friendship
and
coming up.
longer, like
Mhm.
12 years, I think.
I think
Okay.
so.
There you go.
11 at least.
Yes. Angela, will you so we talked about who's here.
Yeah. I'm
Will you
excited
intro our
because she's not
topic?
actually, we didn't invite a therapist on to talk about therapy things.
I'm
Which is
happy
kind
to
of
come back and talk about therapy things. I can definitely do
yeah,
that. And
for
you
sure.
you best believe I'll incorporate some therapy things in this topic. So
Well, when we get into the topic, you'll understand why we need a little therapy. Because we're talking a lot about I would say this is a lot about family dynamics. Primarily, that's kind of where this idea came up. It does show up in the workplace. It does show up in other relationships and friendships and such. But primarily, this kind of, I would say, the tension of this topic comes up mainly in family. So a few years ago, I was introduced to this idea. I was on a long trip. It was back when I was doing very active in homeless advocacy. And so, you're hanging out with a lot of social worker brain types. And so you would go on these trips and, you're sitting in the airport for plenty of time and chatting. And I think it was on some conversation like that or around, the dinner table on a trip that someone said, have you ever heard of this idea of ask versus guess culture? And I'm like, no, tell me about that. And so the way my friend Carrie explained it to me was she said, like if you are from a family that is a guest culture, then after dinner might sound something like this. Hey, grandma, do you need help with the dishes? No, that's okay, honey. Grandma, do you need help with the dishes? No, 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 that's okay. And you think grandma means it's okay, you don't have to help. And if you go sit in the living room, grandma's going to be mad at you the rest of the night. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's not just Southern hospitality. Like grandma expects that you're supposed to guess what she wants you to do. And she said, in an ask culture, after dinner situation, it might sound like this. Hey, will you put away the mashed potatoes? Will you wash the dishes? Will you dry the dishes? And let's get the kitchen cleaned up. And I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. This is interesting. And so I used the just after dinner just because it's a little less traumatizing than some of the other ways that this shows up. But anyway, as we kind of laughed about this and explored this idea, then it was similar timing to when Sammy got married, actually. And it was around that same time. And so I was not conscious when I was 21 and pregnant and incorporating into someone else's, my in-laws. We saw them maybe once a year. I had to tolerate whatever for, a weekend. My mother-in-law came to stay with us, so we worked through that. But I didn't really have this integration with another family the way I watched Sammy do. So I was able to front row seat. Super fun. So anyway,
not just front row seat, but in some cases, research study. You were over here doing a case study on me, and you've got a book coming out. Don't tell me that things in my life aren't used as examples.
I didn't know constantly wear the t-shirt. I'm an author. Anything you say can or may be used in a book story.
Nothing is off record.
Right.
The names may be changed to protect the guilty. Anyway, so we've been talking through this idea for 5 or 6 years, right? And so the tricky part is that our family is a very, very strong ask culture. I'm like, you don't ask, you have not because you ask not. I've come from a long line of sales. I also, when I lived in 4 families, if you didn't ask for what you needed, you're never going to get solved, because I for only a year or 2 lived with somebody who was biologically responsible for bringing me onto this planet. So there was no genetic need to keep me alive. So I had to ask a lot. So we wanted to talk about this on the podcast, but we needed somebody to kind of provide the counterbalance to we think ask culture is superior.
All right. The motivation for why I'm here is revealed.
Well, and I do want to clarify,
no, I mean,
I do think it is superior, but I don't want to be judgmental of people who are guest culture.
Yes.
And yet I find myself so often being can you just tell me what you need? Can we just make it clear? Can I stop having to figure out and read your brain? Because I've got a lot of things going on, and I don't also have time to figure out how to mind read. And so I am sure that there are good, solid benefits of people who are guest culture. I just don't know what they are. So
I'm nodding my head furiously for the people who are audio
listening.
Only. We will get into it, but I was somebody who was raised in guest culture, but now have been able to incorporate through a lot of my own therapy and just my very intentional way that I interact with friends, with family, with my husband at work. I've been able to incorporate ask culture in. Honestly, I channel my inner Sammy when I need to be I'm serious. I'm okay, Sammy, you and then my other really good friend Connor are 2 people that are such great advocates for yourself and what you need. And yeah, I needed that internal voice to say it's okay, go ahead, ask for what you need. And you 2 are my people that have allowed me to do that. And so now I feel I can navigate both cultures pretty smoothly and can see the benefits and the cons of both.
Well, and I do want to clarify that while I do love ask culture, by exploring this topic, by actually digging into some research, I've learned that there are ways that seem natural to me that people that are from a guest culture perceive as just rude I
Mhm.
mean, just how dare you be so rude as to put me on the spot that I would need to answer your question. And so, in the same way that I enjoy learning about the cultures of, if I go to India, this is how to not be rude. If I go to China,
Mhm.
this is how not to be rude. In the same way, I do want to, in addition to my, perpetual lifelong struggle to not be judgmental, I do want to not appear rude to people. And
Of
I
course.
still want to get my needs met. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about what guest culture looks like, maybe for you, or kind of what you've observed?
Yeah.
Maybe if
Yes.
somebody has some other examples besides just the after dinner and Angela's rude.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So the after dinner one, I was smiling and laughing because I'm like, wow, have you just described my childhood? Like, there we go. Cool. um, I will say I think my mom is a little bit more direct, but my mom is from the north. So I think, Angela, whenever you said like, oh, is this not just like Southern hospitality? I'm like, now wait a minute. Let's look at those. I'd be very interested in the research behind that. So my mom's
Mhm.
from the north. She's from Ohio. Um, and
That's
from
see, I lived in Ohio. This could be where I got the ass culture.
There we go. There we go. But my dad is from like Texas and very much in Southern culture. Like the way that we ended up in Little Rock, Arkansas was because he didn't want to move any farther north than Little Rock. Little Rock was as far north as he would go. So,
And
uh,
just so in case if people can't hear me, it is ask ASK in case
yes.
because it's funny
Read,
when
feel
I
free
talk
to read
about
the title of the episode. We'll make sure that it is spelled
when
out.
I said it's rude, I'm like, well, yeah, if you're ass culture. Anyway, so okay, back to you. So mom is
I'm
from the
s-
north, dad's from the south.
I'm so glad that you made that joke because it's been in my head this entire time. Is like I've been listening, taking in research, like talking about this with Curtis, my husband, and yeah, I'm like, gotta really enunciate the K. So
Exactly.
yeah, the K. Um, okay, so kind of just growing up, it was very much so I was the oldest of five total kids. And I come from like a blended family. So and all four of my parents, because my two like biological parents, they got remarried. Um, and so all four of my parents were like full-time working parents. I'm the oldest of five kids. I had to do a lot of guessing of like what needs to be done around the household because my parents, they might have been gone. They might have been really busy or working with another kiddo, like with one of my siblings. And then I had to kind of like fill in the gaps and figure out what do I need to do? Like look around, what's not being done, what needs to be done, and then do the thing. So rather than kind of taking that responsibility off my parents, it was something that was I took on um, kind of out of necessity. And I think my parents might have different views of things, but this is how I view my childhood. Um, this has come up for me when it comes to like working with like being with friends, and also at work as well. I think sometimes it can come up at work. This person like emailed us one time or sent us a Slack that was like, hey, it would be really great if we could, you know, record new hire training. So that way we could see, like, make sure our messaging from new hire training through mentoring is like consistent. And I'm over here, I'm like, well, they are just guessing at it. But my manager was like, no, they're telling us. And I was like, are they telling us? Or are they saying it would be nice? Like, can we
That
say
is
no?
like
So I,
classic guest culture though, to say it would be great if.
yeah,
It would be
yes.
great if this happened. That is the
Or like
not
we were
rude
thinking
way of saying
about,
do this thing.
yeah, we were thinking about doing this thing. Um, and so that was where my ask culture kind of came in, where I was like, do we really need to do that thing? And then my manager was like, we need to do the thing. Then we can't say no to this. I'm like, but can we? I would like to. So, um, yeah. So It's hard for me to think back through childhood and really come up with an example, but I can say more about the feelings that I get from childhood
Mhm.
that come up nowadays. And honestly, Angela, whenever you were talking about the after dinner, like the dishes, if my mom was cleaning and we were not also cleaning, something was wrong. If she didn't have to tell us, like, do this, do this, do this, it was just expected that we were also cleaning. And to the point that that is such an ingrained feeling that, like, we have somebody who comes over every other week to clean our house, and I I can't be in the house while she's cleaning because then I want to jump in and start cleaning too. And I'm like, no, 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 this is literally her job. I need to leave the house and go do my job. But there's just like that, it's like in my gut, which I know that
Mm.
means it's just in such like a core part of me that is just ingrained that, like, if somebody else is cleaning, it's guest culture, you should also be cleaning.
Mm.
That's
Sammy,
Yeah,
I
when you were
love
giving
that.
that example, I was like, "Oh, Angela, I feel that on a visceral level. Here we go."
Well, so that's
So
interesting because I don't feel that at all. Like I'll be at church and that's where I see it. This guest
Mm,
culture show up a lot is because I don't have a lot of extended family here and don't have to deal with in-laws very closely. But at church, my church family, where it's like after the thing and everybody they're cleaning it. And not to say that I won't help, but like if I end up getting in a deep conversation with somebody, I have watched guest culture people be very uncomfortable talking and visiting and having a meaningful conversation because other people are cleaning. Like we
mhm.
should be doing that as well. And I'm like, no, 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 no. This is community time. I feel compelled to make people feel welcome because I have the gift of hospitality is one of my spiritual gifts. I don't have the works thing. And so I can see how people then would think I'm rude because how dare you? You're chatting instead of cleaning. And I do try to make a differentiation of like if we're just chit-chatting, yes, that's clean and chit-chat. But if we're like having a meaningful conversation, but
Mhm.
people could think I'm rude because I'm not shitting on myself to get over there and clean.
Yeah.
Sammy, you've encountered this, and we know that your sweet in laws do listen to the podcast. So you're going to navigate this little section with lots of care and comfort because we absolutely adore your in laws. That bonus side thing, I never thought about when my kids got married that I would get some new friends. Like, I just never thought about it because my families are so far and my in-laws are so far apart. They didn't meet till Sammy got married. And
Mm.
so I love it that we're friends with your in-laws. So you've seen
Well, and
guest
I
culture.
think I have seen a lot of guest culture. And I've actually talked about this with Melinda, my mother-in-law, that like her family, like their family is deep, thorough, like 90% of the time guest culture, 10% of the time ask. And honestly, at the times wherever they get to like actually asking directly for their needs, uh something's probably not right. Like somebody somewhere is upset, something has gotten really pushed far that you're having to be asked directly to do this thing. I know when I first joined in the family, there were a lot of things like I remember my first Christmas with them. It almost was like my list of demands, like, "This is what I need for Christmas to feel like Christmas." And there was a lot of tension because it was like, "Who is this chick that she's just coming in and announcing this is how we're gonna do Christmas?" And it was like, "These are my needs. This is what I would like." We also made a poor decision. If I could go back and change it, I would. When we were engaged, Chris and I were like, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and we'll just start doing every other Christmas now because otherwise it's just going to be super sad to be like the last Christmas that's normal and everyone's just going to cry the whole time. So let's just like not do that. We already had it and it's too bad you missed it. And then I had a really hard time because I did never got sort of like a last Christmas with my family before I was married. And it was like, we're gonna have you will have mimosas on Christmas morning because that's what my family does. And when we were opening gifts, they do sometimes and did for a long time. Like everybody just gets their gifts and then you just all start opening simultaneously. And I'm like, I spent a lot of time seeking, finding the perfect gift for you. I need the gift of watching your face when you open it. Like that's what I now would like in return. So no, I would like to go one person at a time. Ashlyn was just, if you're watching each person goes around.
Takes turns.
And neither way is right or wrong. I don't think either of those are ask or guess culture. Me saying this is how we're going to open presents probably was really rude. I think that's even a too far, where I'm like, no, these are my needs. Everybody is going to meet them, particularly in a space where I knew people wouldn't push back. I knew that the guest culture was so strong that I could just announce, and because nobody else was, quote, confident enough, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a confidence issue, but nobody else would push back against me. I could probably get whatever I want. That doesn't mean that there wasn't like the murmurings of like, golly, who is this chick that's gonna have the rest of our lives with her? And she's already
What's
being
so
this
funny is
way.
the who is this chick? I can put the thought bubble over the person. That makes me laugh so much.
So I think there are times where I have pushed them too far and like pushed them too hard in my desire for directness. There are also other times though where I do have to open the door and talk to my mother-in-law and be like, if they're like, now that I have kids and we come over to their house, if there are things that we are doing that are not working out well, or questions that she has for me, or needs that she has for me, if she has a need for me, I need her to speak that directly. And I want to preemptively give her that space and that permission to ask me for those needs. Like, if you need something, please let me know. Because if I don't give that to you, it is not because I am trying to be rude. It is not because I don't notice. There are times where, well, it is actually because I don't notice. That it's really it, is that I didn't notice and I didn't have enough capacity to be trying to figure out everything else in this situation. Can you do me the favor that if you need something, can you please just ask me directly? And her and I have had that conversation and it went over very well, to give her that space and that freedom to not be rude, to give her the permission that if you do need these things from me, I need you to ask. That is what I need right now, because I don't have otherwise I won't notice. I'm not going to be able to pick up on that with particularly when I was in the height of my anxiety and then 2 kids and at my in-laws house where I'm not comfortable. Like, I just didn't have enough brain capacity to be like checking everybody in the room. Is everybody okay? Am I doing something wrong? Like, does anybody need anything from me?
Right.
No, I just was like, I doing the best I can. Tell me what you need and I can make it happen.
I appreciate that your sister-in-law also, when you had Peter, she came and stayed with you and she's like, I've never had a baby and I'm not my mom who notices that the laundry needs to be done and notices I'm going to notice the dishes need to be done. But if there's something else, she also, I think you modeled that so that she could say that to you and say, will you please ask me? I'm here and want to help you. And I won't notice. I don't even know that there's things that need to be done. So will you please? So I think you've also modeled that for people to help you in addition to
Right.
you being offering of their meeting their needs, but you've also
Well, and I have, like, in that situation, I have definitely benefited from my mother-in-law's guest culture, that after I had both of my children and she came and stayed at my house for like a week or so. And some people were like, your mother-in-law stayed at your house for a whole week after you had a baby? Like, oh my gosh, the horror. And I'm like,
it's
I
glorious.
didn't wash a single piece of laundry. Like, I showered once and put the towel on the rack because you could then reuse the towel. No, we washed the towel. She like went into my bathroom, got the towels, washed them. Like, you would dry your hands, practically falling around. Dry your hands. Let's go wash that towel. I mean, it feels like
That
an
sounds
exaggeration.
incredible.
It's
That sounds
amazing.
incredible.
I
Yeah.
felt like, and every need was tended to. My water was never empty. Like,
Yeah.
would walk by, see if my water was half full, go refill it, bring it back. And I definitely took advantage of that. Melinda, if you're listening, thank you so much for caring for me in that way, because I am so grateful that there was a period of time in my life where I'm sitting here like, I just got sliced open. I looked down at my C-section scar. Like, I went through major surgery and I do all these things. And now I'm trying to take care of a new child and I don't know what I'm doing. And somebody else is just tending to the things that I don't need to be dealing with. And
And
I
I loved it as your mom because I'm not at all like that. I'm
I
nurture,
didn't
not on
want
the
to say
top of
that
my
also.
list. No, no, no. I'll own it. I'm not like that. I'm not the one that's like automatically nurturing. I think that I did. I mean, I think I was helpful in my own way,
Oh, yes.
but because I obviously a kid needs to be diapered all the time. But I had not had C-sections and Melinda had. And so she, especially with Henry, was gloriously
Mm.
helpful on just here, this is what you just they offer. Let me just see your needs and meet them. So I guess that would be the big advantage to guest culture
Yes.
is there's a and I value people that are considerate. And so if I look at that as people that are guest culture, by default are probably considerate. They're people's needs. And just like everything, we can pendulum swing to the extreme.
I'm I'm with you. Like you can pendulum swing to the extreme. I think it's our responsibility just as people who interact with lots of people on the face of the earth. It's our responsibility to be able to navigate both cultures effectively, especially if you are a manager and you've got people who report to you, to be able to meet that managee, like where they are in their culture, help coach them a little bit. Like if they're fully into ask culture, like kind of bring them back a little bit. Fully into guest culture, let's help them be a little bit more assertive. But it's the same thing too as like as a parent helping, which I'm not a parent, so please, y'all, I'm like motioning to y'all. Y'all are the panel of experts on this topic. Um, but like kind of coaching our kids to be able to ask for what they need, but also coaching them on how to be observant and kind of be aware of how the people around them are thinking and feeling and kind of being able to take a gauge on that friendship or that interaction, and being able to be very like sensitive to how other people like to what other people need from you. So I think it's also it's our responsibility to be able to navigate both because there are positives for each one and like I said like kind of drawbacks for each one as well, and I'm happy to speak to some
Yeah,
of.
let's talk about some of the positives of guest culture.
Yeah, yeah, so the positives of guest culture is some of the things that I just mentioned. Like i I can walk into a room like what Sammy was describing with her mother-in-law. Like I can walk into a room and I can see, I'm very observant. I'm like I can see exactly what's going on and I can make some educated guesses as to where my energy needs to be put forth without, let's say, asking somebody, the host of a party or my mom or my manager. If I walk in and like there's a lot of energy in the room, or maybe somebody who's really focused in on something, I don't have to draw their attention away from their task. I don't have to put the burden of creating a to-do list for me because that can create such additional energy to be able to direct somebody else whenever you're already taking care of X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
Um, and so it can be really helpful. Like that's a pro of guest cultures to be able to come in and be able to take care of business, do the things that you need to do, without adding additional responsibility on somebody else. And so it can make you very, you learn over time through trial and error with this other person, you become familiar with them, and then you can kind of start to really have a more accurate reading on like what they need in a given moment. Um,
I love that you
I
said educated guess
Yes. Yes, because
because
it's not foolproof, and especially if it's somebody that, like, I don't know very well, I might I might ask them more about, like, "Hey, I see you're really busy. How can I help? Or what would you like me to do?" But if I'm coming over to Sammy's house and I see, she's taking care of Peter, Chris has got Henry, like
the
Teddy's
dog's going
doing
crazy.
something, I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, I'm gonna do the dishes or I'm gonna
right.
do something and clean up something in the kitchen because I know that Sammy enjoys having like a clean kitchen, like a clean space.
Mhm.
So,
I think that, so what I heard from that was that when it comes to tasks, it's probably easier to make those educated guesses,
mhm,
right? Because you're like, okay, what are the things that need to be done? And what could be that could get a slippery slope is if we then apply that to someone's like having an emotional experience and they're experiencing a lot of sensations that they are maybe not know what to do with. And if we make an educated guess, this is how I'm going to handle it without pausing to ask, what do you need right now? That
mhm.
could be the place where that gets just a little bit slippery when it comes to emotions potentially.
Yes, yes. So as a therapist, I every day in my sessions, I navigate both through guess and ask culture because again, for guessing, there's a lot of times when people can have unspoken needs where maybe they're having an emotional experience and particularly with the people that I'm working with who might have experienced a lot of trauma or emotional neglect, they don't have the words to be able to describe their internal experience. There's neural pathways that have gotten crossed or underdeveloped where they have a hard time asking for what they need.
Mm.
And so in that case, being in guest culture can be very helpful because I can pick up on very easily maybe their nonverbal body language, with my knowledge of them over time. Like after a few months of working with them, I can start to better understand their patterns of thoughts, and I make educated guesses in a way that I'm phrasing them as educated guesses so that my clients have the ability to say, no, that's not right. So oftentimes I might say like, okay, I see your face kind of making this expression. I'm wondering how you might be feeling right now. And they're like, oh, I don't really know. And then I could say, I could see somebody in this situation like feeling really angry. I wonder if you might be feeling angry. And they're like, yeah, I think I am angry. And so it kind of helps them be able to put names and words to what might be happening inside. But I've also gotten like, no, it's not anger. Like, okay, okay. I could see somebody also feeling like really just shocked and like, or feeling defeated or feeling hopeless. And I kind of just start naming some words until they're like, oh, that's the one that feels more accurate. So it's then also helping them from a guest culture be able to be more ask culture because they need the words. So,
Mm. Oh,
I had an experience early marriage where my husband, who grew up guest culture, tried to make that educated guess on what I needed when I was upset. And this happened for a while. This is not just like one isolated experience. Early
mhm.
marriage, you trial and error, you learn. And
We
I would
learn.
get upset and he would go do things around the house, like wash the dishes, go vacuum, go do something else. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, I'm crying right now. Why did you just leave me to go do something else? He's like, "Well, I just assumed that you needed space. I assumed that it would be helpful for me to go get some stuff done. I also assumed that me doing things for you might make it better, the
Mhm.
like sort of acts of service." And we had to really work through it to be like, that's not what I need right now. What I would really like is for you to come sit down next to me while I cry and not do anything. Like, that's what I want. And so it was interesting, particularly early marriage where things are also just like, I don't know, sometimes harder to navigate. You're like, it's still new and figuring all that out.
Mhm.
But getting to the point where now he knows if I'm upset, he can actually make the educated guess that I really want him to sit next to me. And by having the conversation where we were able to get to the point where he then understands that and we can communicate, we're in a better place.
Mhm. Yeah. And
well, so
there's an element there too of in the moment it might feel like, "Ah, why are you cleaning? Like, why are you doing all of these things instead of like sitting with me?" And then also realizing that like that was Chris's way of like trying to take care of you. Like it wasn't he made an educated guess. it wasn't what you needed in that moment, but also being able to take the time to see like he really was trying. And now he operated, he made the best decision and guess that he could with the information that he had and the tools that he had at the time, and now he's got new information. And so now it's on him to make a more personalized guess at the next time.
So you're
Rooted
saying assume positive intent. He did have
in
positive intent by cleaning. He wasn't trying to just ditch you and abandon
right,
you. And
Right.
so you're saying
right.
assume some and see the attempt.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Ruptures and repairs happen all the time in every single relationship, whether it's marriages, friendships, at work, with my clients. Like I stick my foot in my mouth all the time, or my clients do, or Curtis does. Like it happens all the time where we say something or we do something that we thought was okay, but it wasn't, or we thought we were on the right track, but we really weren't. And then
Or we weren't thinking at all
we weren't thinking at all.
because we had our own stuff going on and we had
We
our
were
own
just,
nervous system
yeah,
activated. So we weren't thinking. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it sounds like Sammy, for you and Chris, like that was a rupture. That was like I had this emotional experience and you did something that was not attuned to what you needed to be taken care of in that moment. And he's over here thinking, oh, I did the best that I could. Here, look at me doing all of these things. What do you mean you're not happy with that? Like, can't you
Yeah.
give me the benefit of the doubt? And then that kind of creates tension there. And so then when inevitably these ruptures happen, it's important that we're able to make repairs so we can come back together and be like, hey, I see from like how you grew up with your family, like this is why you made the decisions that you did. It's not because you were this like insensitive person that didn't care. You just didn't, you literally did not know any better.
Yeah.
And then now you do know better. And so now we can move forward together. Having that repair when ruptures have happened can make those relationships stronger because then you're learning how to take care of other people.
I just think about people that they take anything to the pendulum swing, right? So then Chris could have been like, nope, I'm never going to clean because you didn't appreciate me
Yep.
when I tried to clean. And it's like, wait, no, I do appreciate you when you clean. Just in that moment, I needed something different. And
Mhm.
so I think that if I look at marriages, 20 years in, where it feels like one partner is not helping the other, if they didn't learn that repair, they applied the learning in the wrong way.
Mhm.
Particularly like Barry and we had similar patterns, ironic, but ours were like when I would get mad, I was more anger more than sadness. Sammy's better at sadness than I am. But anyway, so I would get mad. And sometimes I was in the wrong and Barry would still clean and do all the stuff. And the honey-do list would get done when I was mad, which set up some really unhealthy patterns for us.
Mhm.
Number one, if I wanted something done, then I would get angry and it was very effective. Number
Mhm.
two, some of the time I would tell him, I'm like, if you would have just like stayed in the argument with me, you would have actually, I was in the wrong, but you've just rewarded bad behavior. So I was a jerk. You cleaned the house. So it's now okay for me to be a jerk because if I want the house cleaned, then I'm just going to go be a jerk again and it's going to work. And it set up some really, really unhealthy patterns of things. And also one time Barry asked me, he goes, how come I never win arguments? And I was like, well, because when I know that I'm wrong, when I figure it out, I go, whatever. And he goes, oh, whatever means I won? I go, you're too stupid to quit talking. Like when you figure out you're wrong, you keep arguing and you don't ever like stop and just be like, oh, I see your point. You keep going. You just dig in deeper. And I said, I don't. This is why you never win arguments, is because when I see that I'm wrong and I just like, whatever, I'm out.
That sort of reminds me though of like the kid who's about to lose the board game. So then they're like, I quit.
Yep.
I can't
Oh,
lose if I quit.
Oh my gosh.
exactly. Oh yeah, terrible. Anyway, I hated that I gave him that like, secret decoder ring, because then arguments just got a lot more Well, they got more fair. Let's be real. They did this little rabbit hole because then he would be like, "Ah!" Whenever I would, whatever. He's like, "Oh, I won! Yes, okay." And
Oh,
eventually, I did grow up, and I could say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong.
mhm.
I messed that up."
I
But
do want to circle us back up the rabbit hole
yep,
though.
yep,
We talked about some benefits of guest culture.
yep.
I feel like
Mhm.
we have sort of implied some cons of guest culture that people
Yes.
sometimes having to read your mind, sometimes having to, it's just not always clear. It's not always
Yeah.
obvious. There's also the risk that your needs aren't going to get met.
Mhm.
Right.
What are some, I'm skipping past that because I just feel like we've
Yep.
hinted at it, even though
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
haven't really talked about it. What are some benefits and cons of ask culture?
Yeah.
Anybody, not just Ashlyn,
Oh,
but
go Ashlyn, because
Oh,
I will pontificate for days.
okay.
I
I
think she
do
would gonna present a more balanced approach.
I do wanna hear y'all's approaches as people who are firmly in ask culture. I ask culture is so wonderful because you as somebody in guest culture, once I got over the discomfort of directness, of somebody being direct with me and me being direct with someone else, again, this took years of like self-esteem work, trauma work, like all sorts of things just to be able to get to this place. And I'm still working. I'm still in this. We're all lifelong learners. But it's so, so, so nice. I think it's very telling that two of my closest friends are people in ask culture because I just feel so at ease around them that I know I'm not missing anything. I can just sit next to them. I can chill. We can go, Sammy, you and I can go do things. Connor and I can go do things. And like, I know that I'm not secretly making y'all feel upset or unsatisfied with what we did. Like if y'all want to do something, you say it. If you're like, "Hey, let's go do this thing now." And I'm like, "Okay, great, let's go do it." Or when we're
or if
having
I
a
didn't want to do
conversation,
something that you
right.
suggested, I'll be like, I actually don't want to go for a hike right now. Can we go do something different instead? Let's go rock
Yes,
climb.
rather than us get a mile into a hike and you're like, "Ah, this really sucks. Like it's hot, there's bugs everywhere." I'm like, "Well, I didn't know you didn't want to do this." So,
Right.
Right.
right, right. There's just something so settling um of knowing that like nothing is being latently asked of you. No need is being left secretly unmet that is going to come back and bite you in the butt later. It feels like a very genuine and authentic friendship. I
Mhm.
think also with ask culture too, there if you can incorporate those skills with kids, then they can grow up having those words, having the phrases and the confidence to be able to advocate for themselves, say what they like, say what they don't like, and being able to, I think it can help people be more self-sufficient and have more clear and direct communication with others. Um,
I would say one benefit of ask culture is that group trips are a little more fun because can I just tell you, like in a group scenario where you're, especially on a trip where you're like, I don't know, what do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do? I don't know
oh
what you
my
want to do.
gosh.
Oh my gosh, it drives me absolutely crazy. And so I'll be like, I'll ask like all the people, like, what do you want to do? And everybody will be like, I don't care. What do you want to do? And I'm like, okay, well, nobody had a preference. So my preference would be that we go have Mexican. And then somebody will be like, no, 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 I don't want it. I don't want a Mexican. I'm like, why didn't you speak up? You
Right.
know? And so I have found that group trips, if I say, okay, how about Mexican or Asian? Or is there anything you don't want to eat tonight? Or
Mhm.
is there anything you don't want to do? And so I have found in the navigating, you talked about the guest versus ask, offering options seems to be less rude to
Yes.
people that are guest culture if I offer a couple of options
Mhm.
instead of just saying, "Can we do this thing?" Um, or
We
speaking it as like my preference would be. Does anyone else have a preference? Which I think in a couple of podcasts ago we talked about that sometimes people are don't even have enough mental capacity to even figure out what their preference is. So
right.
there's that whole other matrix dimension of that. You were going to say something, Sammy.
Uh, Ashlyn and I definitely experienced this. We went on a group trip, probably, I don't remember, a while ago now. And one of our friends was like, "Oh, there's this ice cream shop around the corner that I've heard about. Do you guys want to go?" And we were like, "Yeah, I'm not opposed." And then it was like, "Oh, it's closed right now. It opens in an hour. All right, cool. We'll not go." And we continued on our trip. And that was like, it was a very hard offense for our friend that we did not make an
She
effort
thought
to go
she
to.
had asked for her need to be met.
She thought
And
she
when
asked,
she
"I want to
said,
go to the
"Do
ice cream
you want
shop."
to go?"
Right. And that was not what we interpreted, and it was really hard for her. And it's something that was I struggled with as an ask culture person of like, "But you didn't actually ask me to go. If you would have said, 'This is really important to me. I want to wait around an hour so we can go to this ice cream shop,' I would have absolutely done that." Like we didn't have that much going on. I didn't have the information to know that this was a big deal. And I
Yeah.
think that that is something that I again, another reason where I'm like, "No, stop making me guess. I just didn't know."
Right.
Blah. But I I do also know that you can steamroll people with ask culture, and
Yes, the
you can
downsides.
do
Mhm.
well, nobody said they have a preference, so I'm gonna say I have a preference then, like, we get to do my thing. What are some downsides of ask culture?
So some downsides of ask culture that I've seen, Sammy, you hit the nail right on the head. It can feel it can feel like it's very much so steamrolled. It can also feel it can come across as very insensitive, um, especially with people who are in not just guest culture, but people who have, again, I'm coming from like a trauma therapist background. So people who literally don't have the words or don't have the skills to be able to ask for what they need, even though they want to. If if we kind of just go straight into ask culture and be like, well, you didn't ask, so here we go, we're going to do this thing instead, it's really making that person feel left out, feel unheard, and not a valuable part of the team or of the group. And so then it breeds a lot of like disconnection.
So have you ever been in a situation, do you have any examples, maybe something concrete of where somebody was kind of demanding ask culture and guess, yeah, ask culture. And really we should have been a little more sensitive and really seen somebody's needs.
Mhm. So I've seen so Sammy, you were talking about your mother-in-law earlier, very much so in guest culture. I was smiling and kind of chuckling to myself the entire time because I'm like, oh, my mother-in-law is the same way. But I also grew up in guest culture, so we sometimes it's like the blind leading the blind whenever we're hanging out together. But I am more like I try to think about her needs. She tries to think about mine. And so the thing is, though, is my husband and I have been trying to do more ask culture when with us and with our friends and with work, all the other places. Like we are trying to incorporate more ask culture um, into our day-to-day life. And there was a situation that happened recently. So it was around like Mother's Day. And my mother-in-law was coming into town. My husband had like a band performance at the same on Mother's Day. And so my mother-in-law was being a single mom and my husband being an only kid. Like, of course, she came into town. We're going to celebrate Mother's Day with her. She's going to be able to watch Curtis perform. It's going to be a wonderful day. And as somebody from guest culture, I'm like, and it's Mother's Day. Like, we need to do more things. But I wanted to give Curtis the opportunity to like plan things for his own mom. Like, I was planning stuff. I've planned all the gifts and things for my mom, my stepmom, all the grandmothers. Like, and then his mom was coming into town to see him. So I was also in guest culture because Curtis needed to guess that he needed to plan his mom's Mother's Day weekend. So I own my part in this as well. Um, and so we were sitting on the couch. It was like the Friday night. Mother's Day is on Sunday, and I have my mother-in-law here. Curtis is on the other side, and I'm literally in the middle, which feels very telling. And she asks, like, just asks the question. She's like, "So, what do we have planned for this weekend? Like, what do we have planned for Mother's Day?" And Curtis, bless his heart, he was like, "Oh, well, we're just gonna, we've got the performance and maybe we can get breakfast or something." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And I could tell she was kind of starting to tear up a little bit because he was kind of being dismissive, nonchalant. And I could just I was able to guess in that moment of like she's really uncomfortable and she's feeling like disappointed and sad. He's feeling indignant of like,
If you
he's
want
going through the
something, ask for your needs to be met.
right, right. And I'm like, okay. So I jumped in and I was like, I will help Curtis later. I'm going to tune to the woman next to me who's tearing up. I'm like, well, I was thinking too, like we could have breakfast together and then also like do some gifts on Sunday. Like we have um a nice gift for you and then maybe like a really great dinner afterwards too. Like how does that sound? And we could go shopping and we could just spend the whole day together. And she was like, "That sounds really wonderful." And she kind of was settled a little bit, but I could tell she was disappointed that her son didn't come up with the plan. Um, and so then later that night, I was talking to Curtis, and I was like, "Hey, like I noticed this thing." I just kind of told him what I noticed that when he gave that response to her question, that was her really asking, like, what have y'all planned for Mother's Day to like help me feel special? Like I came all the way down here to spend time with you. Like I this is my day. Like I want to feel special. And Curtis didn't. It was clear he hadn't put in the thought behind it. Um, and so I told him what I noticed and her feelings and how they were heard. And Curtis was like, well, if she wanted something, like, she should ask. Like she should if she wants to us to take her out to dinner, if she wants us to get her a gift for Mother's Day, then she needs to ask for it. And I'm like, no, hold on. Ask culture is great until it's not. Like we've swung too far in the opposite direction for two reasons here. Number one, you like a few reasons here. Your mom is in guest culture. You know that she's not going to be able to guess that she needs to ask for what she needs. You haven't told her that. And so
Hmm.
you are still doing, Sammy, I think when you and I talked about this, like you made the point of like, he's also still in guest culture because he was making his mom guess that she needs to share her needs. How is she supposed to know that she needs to ask for
Suddenly,
what she needs
Right, do
after all
something
these
different
years.
than what she's always done.
after 65 years? Like she needs to just do a different communication style in this moment.
Mhm.
And then also, I mean, what a time to like, you want people to make you feel special. And
Mhm.
sometimes you don't want to have to tell somebody, here's exactly how I want to be taken care of, A through Z. This is how I want you to take me out to a nice dinner. I want you to spend money on me. I want a gift. I want all of these things because then that can come across as, I think to anybody, kind of like a little demanding or
Right.
right, right.
Rude.
Rude,
Rude.
especially around like Mother's Day, birthday, Christmas, we might set up some like expectations because there's more people involved, but like for birthdays and like Mother's Day, Father's Day, you want to, I think it can show being able to guess what somebody might want for a gift, being able to guess of like, hey, they want to be taken out to eat, or maybe they want to go on a hike, maybe they want to go to an escape room, maybe they want to go do something fun. If you can plan that after you have the knowledge of this person and what they like and don't like, it can really kind of be a testament to help someone be like, wow, my son really knows me, or wow, my
Mm.
daughter-in-law really knows me well, or my friend really knows me well. They know exactly what I wanted. They knew how to make me feel special on this day. Um,
And I would like to incorporate how Curtis might have used ask culture.
Mhm.
He might have said to his mom, "This weekend is really about celebrating you, Mom. What are
Mhm.
some of the things that you would love to do? Maybe there's stuff that we've done
Right.
before that you want to repeat. Do you want us to surprise you? Or
Mhm.
do you want us to plan it? Or is there something that you have your heart set on?" That's like an effective way for him to have used ask culture of like, how
Mhm.
can we, if he didn't feel like, because maybe some of the time she does like shop and some of the time she does like to hike. And well, how are you feeling this weekend, Mom? Are
Right.
you wanting to need to do some shopping, need to do some hiking? We need to do a couple of tasks around the house. Can you help? We'd love your opinion. You know, moms love to
Mhm.
give their opinion,
Oh,
some
yeah.
moms.
Yes.
And so, right, being able to ask those things could have been a more effective way for him to use that ask culture to
Mhm.
then say, what do I, how can I help you?
I
Yeah.
once had a coworker and her and I were talking sort of about this idea, even with like the where you show up for others. And this is not the best metaphor, but sometimes it works. If you were to like have a point system for things that you did, if my husband surprised me with a gift or with something special on my birthday, that's 100 points. If I had to ask for the surprise for something special to be done, it's probably like 60 points. It's
Mhm.
not to say that you didn't get points, but you got less points because I had to give you the instruction. It's like if
Right.
you asked for the hint, then like, oh, well, you got a little bit less of the score. You didn't not get a score, but in some things, I don't know, like it can feel like it is worth less. Um, it's not the best, but like sometimes that's just how it is and how it feels. I
Huh,
don't know.
I think that's still about consideration and about taking things too far. I do have one more. So I was at somebody's birthday party and we'd been hanging out for a couple hours. So I was like, okay, I have this podcast coming up. So I have some questions. And there was like 6 different women. And so they're all married. So I'm like, woo, we got 12 different conversations about ask versus guest culture. And one of them, so fascinating to me. They were like, I am the oldest child. I am part of ask culture. It is very comfortable in my family to ask for your needs to be met. However, I'm the one that's put together. As the oldest, I have my crap together.
Mm.
It is very difficult for me. I feel very vulnerable asking for my need to be met because number one, I don't want to be categorized as my youngest sister who is a mess. Ooh, okay, that's a whole other topic. Number two, I could be rejected. If I ask them to meet my needs, they could say no. And
Mhm.
then now it's worse for me because rejection is now, I'm now abandoned. There's like all of this extra stuff. And then another person made the point, I have a hard time asking. It feels very vulnerable to me because I don't actually want to appear needy and I don't want somebody to know my
Mm.
needs.
Mhm.
And
Oh.
interesting because, various marital statuses from long-term divorced, middle of divorced, long-term married, lots of perspectives, but the idea that it was vulnerable for them and it felt very scary to ask. I wanted to just, it was such a big aha for me. I literally had to be like, can I hold on? Can I like take some notes right here? Because I'm going to be doing some podcast research for this. So I just want to bring up that could be another downside of ask culture
Mhm.
is that you do expose yourself to potential rejection.
I think you hit I think that's a wonderful point, Angela. Like, we were talking about why it can feel why there's so much, like, disruption can happen whenever the 2, cultures intersect or meet, but then also just kind of the ruptures that can happen just in general based on people's comfortability with vulnerability. And
Mhm.
even though they might be in ask culture, feeling very still not wanting to say their needs. Like, other people can ask all day and I'm not going to take it as rude. Like, great, I'm going to meet your need. Oh, you have a need. I'm going to meet your need. I'm not allowed to have needs. I
Yep.
can't ask for what I need.
Yep. Or I can ask for something, but not really, really, really need. Like, oh,
Right.
yeah, I need help moving this couch.
Hmm.
That's easy to ask, but I need somebody to sit with me while I cry my eyes out.
Yeah.
Are there any other like kind of considerations? We talked a little bit about like if I go to India or if I go to China,
Mhm.
and you don't even have to leave America to get different types of cultures. So are there other layers that we need to think about when this intersection between ask and guess culture?
Yeah. So something that I was thinking whenever I was kind of researching topics like ask and guess culture, like in preparation for this podcast, and just something that I was thinking about was how this can come up in different cultures, different um, families across the country, and like how we were talking about earlier, like North versus South, like Northern families versus Southern families. I was also thinking about some of the differences between like white families and Black families, or families from a Latinx like background and community. And so, and how, man, this could be a whole topic in itself, but like how ask and guess culture might show up in some of those families as well.
Mhm.
And I'm being very cognizant that we are three white women here talking about this issue. And so I think there's also an element here of how different cultures, different races can be perceived based on whether they are ask or guess culture. Um,
Mm.
the thing that's really coming up for me is, a lot of Black families can be part of ask culture. They are really direct, they know what they want, they know what they need, and they need to ask for it because oftentimes BIPOC communities have been overlooked. Nobody's going to guess what their needs are because they are out of mind, especially of white people in power. They're not going to guess. Um, People not guessing what Black families need or what Black communities need. So they ask for what they need. They advocate. They have to be their own advocates because, again, especially people in power are not going to guess. And I think that's also why there's this like the stereotype or the trope of like the aggressive Black woman or the aggressive Black man, when really all they're doing is just asking for what they need. But especially in Southern white families where we're all guest culture, all of a sudden you have this person who's coming in and maybe they're being more like
More direct.
Forward.
they're being more forward, more direct about what they're needing. And it comes across as like, oh, they're just rude, they're aggressive. And then that rooted in our already like white supremacist background as a country really just kind of furthers and perpetuates this idea that they're different. And
The
it's,
other thing is
yeah.
that in situations where there is authority, like I'm thinking of like in public school situations, or
Mhm.
it is sometimes dangerous to ask for your needs to be met because you could
Yes.
be labeled. And so there can be these like dichotomy of like, I feel like I have to ask for what I need. I need to demand what I need because nobody's listening to me. Kind of like when I started this, when I was like, I lived in families where no one was genetically predisposed to try to keep me alive. I had to be a little bit like asking for my needs. But then if you get yourself into a situation where like if you bring attention to yourself, if you are a person of color, that it might be detrimental for
Yes.
suddenly to people being noticed. And it could be dangerous because the systems of authority have not been are there the rules are not written to be fair in our country. And I think I'm really glad that you brought that up and that we could probably have a whole other episode on just what this is like,
Mhm.
but I'm glad that you brought it up so that we can be sensitive to the fact that this is I think that's what kind of my takeaway is like there's a sensitivity and an empathy to people
Mhm.
that are different than us and not necessarily automatically assuming that our way is the best way, even if it feels like it sometimes.
Mhm.
I think I joke and say, I'm not judgmental. If you complain about your life to me, then I'm going to tell you something that works better, that has worked for me. If you like your life, then don't complain to me about it. Then I will not offer you advice. I'm not offering you judgment. I'm offering you advice on
Mhm.
how I can solve your problem. Literally had somebody last week at church or at a church event that was like, I was asking, how are you? And they were like, oh, I'm kind of stressed out. And I said, oh, well, what's going on? And they told me that they said, I had to stop and think, do I really want to tell Angela Belford what my problem is? Because she will help me solve it. She will try to solve it.
Mhm.
And I was like, I love that you know this about me. I'm not just going to sit there and go, oh, okay, good for you. I like went into a like 20-minute, like, let me instruct you on how to do this thing that you just told me you don't know how to do. I
Mhm.
can solve that problem. So I was glad that he communicated that to me. And I think as I mature, better at asking, can I help you with that? Or do you just need me to listen?
Mhm.
Which is an ask
Ashlyn,
thing. Yeah.
do you have any big takeaways for us? Like, what would you like to leave people with?
I feel like I've said this quite a few times here, but just to reiterate that we've talked about the pros, the cons of both cultures. I think there's benefits to being able to be fully immersed in guests, benefits of being fully immersed in ask. And I can't say it enough, it is our responsibility to be able to navigate both, to be aware of what's going on, so that when we see these patterns come up in our friendships, in our relationships at work, with other communities, that we're able to figure out what's really going on here. Are they a part of guest culture? Are they a part of ask culture? It's not the entire story, but it can give us a little bit more context as to what's the pattern that's emerging. How can I be the better friend, the better relationship partner, so that I can meet that need, because we all have needs, but whether we ask for them or whether we hope that somebody guesses, that's us learning how to take care of that other person. So I think it's our responsibility to be able to understand what cultures do the people in my life come from. How do I interact with them? What do I need to be aware of whenever I talk to this person? So,
I think that's really great. I My takeaway, which is different than what I want to leave people with, is that I'm still going to teach my sons to be direct and ask for the things that they need. Sometimes it's to a fault. For example, the other day, my oldest said, Mom, I'm thirsty. And I said, thanks for letting me know. And I kept doing what I was doing. And then he's like, why didn't you get me something to drink? I'm like, oh, do you want me to get you something to drink? You didn't ask. You just told me information. And I said, thanks for letting me know. So I am in some ways being facetious and pushing him to like, nope, you do have to ask for things sometimes.
mhm,
And he's old enough now that he can get his own drinks. So it's like, did you need help? Do you need help reaching the cup? Did you not know what you wanted to drink? Did you want something that you couldn't reach? Like, you didn't tell me what you needed. So my takeaway is I'm still going to teach my son to be ask culture and also help teach him how to navigate guest culture within that. I want him to operate from a place of being able to speak his needs and recognize and be empathetic for the people around him who
That's
may
what I
not
was
have
going to
that.
say. You want to teach him consideration and empathy to be able to read a room,
mhm.
see what's going on, notice, Mom, I see that you're upset. I see that you're crying, whatever. He can still recognize those things. And so really trying to channel the best of both.
Yeah. And maybe
Beautiful.
we'll have a new generation that can speak their needs and help attend to others much more seamlessly than I feel like we had. We've learned a lot on the fly as adults.
There's so much that we learn from the previous generation, and we take what works for us, we leave the rest, and then we pass that along as well. And the next generation's going to do the same thing. So,
I love it.
Beautiful.
Angela, what reminders do we have for people here at the end of the podcast? There's like a big thing happening right now, like while we're talking about this, which I'm surprised
Yes,
it took us this long to bring it up.
you can currently go to the website and you can pre-order. If you're listening to this like when it's published and not years later, if it's years later, go buy the book right now. But if you're listening to it actively, then in time, we are in book pre-order our season. The book will publish officially on August the 29th. My book is Traveling Light. For somebody's new, maybe they're just listening in because I love Ashlyn. That's fantastic. So we have a new book, Traveling Light, Free Yourself from the Crap in Your Head. And it is available on Amazon and on other booksellers online. We'll be able to put that in the show notes where you can get that. For more information, angelabelford.com. subscribe to the newsletter so that you can hear about all of the cool things that are happening with Traveling Light.
Fantastic. I'm so excited for you and for this conversation and for any fans of Ashlyn, which I am probably would love to be like the club leader of that one. But for all of you who are listening in, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you guys go and be freaking awesome.